Hi, welcome to Pro Talk. I'm Gail Washington and with professional support staff, and we started Pro Talk as a resource for church bookkeepers, nonprofits, small business bookkeepers. We do that virtually, and that's what my company does. And so we have a real burden to help churches and nonprofits and to give them peace of mind, to have ministry and balance and life. And if you're in a small business, I know that's a hard thing to do, as well as if you're in a church, that's very hard to do. But we're going to go over some things today. We've been talking about this month about contributions, how to record them, what's the proper ways, what's the streamline, what's easy to do. And so we're going to go over a few things on recording contributions today. We're going to be talking about, Hannah's going to be talking about some tips on recording them. And we're going to be talking about just three specific things on recording contributions. We're going to talk about taxable deduction, we're going to talk about non-taxable deductions, and we're going to talk about in-kind contributions. And so today we're going to talk about those three things. And I thought that I would go over a couple things just in what is a taxable deduction. If a donor gives you funds, is that tax deductible? These are the things that are tax deductible. Of course, your offerings and tithes are that way. Of course, a missionary, suppose that a group of mission or teens are going on a missions trip. You can, that is a tax deduction. You can do anything that is a cause. Maybe your church is doing a special outreach and you want to designate funds to that. That is a tax deduction. And all of those things would be in a system on or online giving that go to a contribution statement. But Hannah, give everybody some tips on how's the best way to record some of those things.
Okay, well, obviously the tax deductible, this is the most common type of income that you will be dealing with your donors. You're going to receipt them. And like she said, this is your tithes and offerings. If people give to the building fund, the missions, all those things. And you can record them at any type of interval that you want. You could do weekly, monthly, quarterly. The most common for churches is usually a year-end statement. And usually what the bookkeeper would do is keep records every week. Every time they count an offering, they're keeping those records to each member or donor that has given what they gave to. But there are a few things that you do need to remember when receiving and recording this type of donations from your members. On that contribution statement, of course, you want the church's name. You want to have your name on it. You want to have the donor's name on it. And you want to make sure that each donation they give, you want to have each date recorded. You don't just give one total for the whole year on the statement. You want to have each donation that your member gave, the date that they gave it, the amount that they gave it. Those are required. Also at the bottom, a required statement of whether they received any goods or services for the money that they gave listed above. I would strongly suggest, especially to help encourage your donors and to give transparency so that they understand where the money went, is to definitely with each donation line to go ahead and put what they gave to. Was it for tithes and offerings? Was it for missions? Was it for the building fund? That will only encourage them to give more. The more clarity and transparency you give on the donation statement, the more encourages your donor. So those are the things that you want to have on your statement. Again, you can do those at any time as frequently as you would like, but the most common is a year-end statement that each donor would receive, and you want to have those out by January 31st.
Right. And and it's very important too that your contribution statements are accurate. I know everybody makes mistakes, believe me. And when you're a bookkeeper, you're supposed to be perfect, right? But that doesn't happen. And so, but anyway, on your contribution statements, it's super important, especially if you have a new church member or you have maybe a person that is a business person or whatever it may be. They want to make sure that those funds were allocated and they're listed, every single one of them, and that will actually send a message that you're on the ball, that you're knowing what you're doing, that you are managing your finances properly. And so it really does a huge reflection on the church or any nonprofit. And so basically that's super, super important. And those are some good tips. And so next we're going to talk about non-taxable deductions. What is non-taxable deductions? Those are deductions that, for instance, if someone gives through the offering and their teenager is going on a missions trip and they want to specifically designate money to their child or their grandchild or whatever, that is not a tax deductible item. And that's very confusing with a lot of churches, a lot of people, a lot of bookkeepers, and in small nonprofits. Basically, you cannot designate funds to a specific person. Now, you can to the mission trip, but it cannot be specific to a child or individual. And so that's true with missions trips or children's school bills. For instance, if you know of a maybe underprivileged type child that might be going to a Christian school and they can't afford it, or something happened, or they're having a tragedy or whatever, the bottom line is you cannot put their name on that check unless you don't care about getting the tax break for it. So those kind of things are non-taxable deductions, and we are supposed to, in recording them, it really gets confused, right, Hannah? And so she's going to give a few tips on where not to put non-taxable deductions and what to do with them. So
Okay, so basically on this one, you receive this money in, and usually, like she says, it's either for registration, like a trip, everybody pays a certain amount, or for if it's like a couples retreat, things like that. It's money that they're paying to do something, or it's specifically, like she said, for a person. You do not want to put that on their year-end statement. We had just talked about the tax deductible, how you would have every designation line. None of these types of gifts or incomes would go towards that, because they're paying for something, or they want to specifically give money to an individual, maybe for like a benevolent type situation or something, or to a missions trip individually, and you just don't want that on your statement. That's not how it's recorded. It's not a tax deductible event, but you do want to record it under the individual. That's just for the bookkeeping side. It makes it clean. When you did it by hand, usually you would have two different records for people that registered for events or gave towards events, and then people that did their tithes and offerings. Now with the online portal, and that's really kind of where some of the confusion has come in, is because when they give online, a lot of them have event registrations online for teens to give to youth events, or for couples to sign up for a special banquet or something and to pay. It all goes in and it automatically gets pushed over. But one thing when you're setting up your online giving is you can create, usually your softwares allow you to create, and you enter in your tithes and offerings building fund. And when you have an event come up, you might type in missions trip and everybody's paying their flat rate fee. Or you might type in the Valentine banquet, or you might type in the couples retreat, or you might type in whatever the event is, have it as a special giving button, but you want to make sure it's not checked for tax deductible. And that checkbox, you need to be careful to look for that, because that will keep it will still record it under that individual in your database, but it will keep it from showing up on the year end. And these types of events are definitely something you want to keep off the year end contribution statement. It is for the church records only, but it is not for their contribution records, and it should not be mixed together.
right, and it's really, really important too, what Hannah said, is not putting them on that contribution statement. You might think, a lot of people think, well, it's no big deal. Well, it is against IRS code, period. And so you don't ever want to take that person and put them in jeopardy because you have, $300 for a couples retreat that they were paying to go to anyway, or their son to go to camp. And so we want to make sure that those are separated so that they are IRS compliant. And so that's one of the easy mistakes that can happen, especially when they don't check that box.
Right.
So it's an easy oversight. So non-taxable deductions. Okay, and lastly, I'd like to talk about in-kind contributions. First of all, what are they? Let me give you some examples. I have some things written down here. Furniture donation, equipment donation, clothing donation, inventory and supplies. There are tangible or intangible gifts. You could, rent discount would be an in-kind gift. For professional services, you can do accountants, bookkeepers, lawyers, plumbers, electricians. So in-kind gifts are things that are received by the church that cash was not exchanged. It's a non-cash contribution. So for example, if I, pro support staff, end up doing something as a donation to First Baptist Church, then they can write me an in-kind contribution because I didn't have them pay me any cash or vice versa. So bottom line, it's a non-cash contribution. So anyway, but there's some tips about that, and Hannah's going to go over that because that's one of the common mistakes that people make in recording in-kind contributions. They don't do it properly. So what's some tips that we could give them today?
Well, and really this is one that can be used in a couple different situations. Not all churches deal with this. Some churches decide up front that they don't want to deal with this kind of thing because the paperwork is a little different, the bookkeeping's a little different. Today we're just going to talk about kind of receipting the donor for them. And for some instances, when a church may come to this is if you have a missions closet or a food pantry, and you use that for your outreach in your community, and you give those items away. And instead of people giving cash through the offering to help support that ministry, they may come in and have a trunk full of groceries that they want to put in the food pantry to help give away. And when that happens, this doesn't necessarily go on their year-end contribution like all the cash gifts do, but this is usually a handwritten receipt. A lot of people just keep a template on the computer that they print out on letterhead, and basically that way it has your name again, the church's name. You enter the donor's name, and then you have to actually type out or handwrite a description of what it is that they donated. If they donated the food for the food pantry, you want to explain what that is. Say you had a vacation Bible school and somebody came to help build a set on the stage, and they bought supplies and they donated those supplies. They don't want you to pay them back for that, but they may have spent $200 on doing the stage. Well, you could write them an in-kind gift for just what they did. Now, it would only be for the supplies that they give it. It's not for the individual's time, the volunteer's time. But if any cash that he spent out of pocket, instead of reimbursing him, you could do an in-kind receipt for that. And what you want to have on that is the estimated value of what they gave. Now, if you have receipts for what they gave, that makes it real simple. If you had a missions house that maybe you were fixing up and somebody donated a couch, it might not be brand new. There might not be no receipt, but you could kind of look up in between you and the donor, what is the fair market value of the couch in the condition of it is that time, and that would be what was written in on that receipt. And it's kind of just like a one-time receipt for the in-kind gift. Again, it's recorded separately from all the cash and offering. And that's kind of how that's handled. Again, it's for non-cash items, and it's just for the items that they are providing, and you write it at the time that they give it. And again, you want to make sure that you have the church's name on it, the donor's name, the date that they gave it, and then the fair market or the estimated value of that gift, along with a clear description of what it is that they gave the church. It needs to state clearly what it is that they provided to you.
Right. So, and one of the common mistakes are they put it on the cash donations that people do, submit at the end of the year for tax deductions. In-kind gifts are still a tax deductible event, but it is on a separate receipt because when you get ready to file your taxes, it will ask you if you have in-kind gifts and things that you've donated. For instance, if you donated to the thrift shop, it says, do you have any donations that you donated, physical items, or you purchased something on their behalf? But like Hannah was talking about, it's not the labor part of it, but it's actually any kind of things they purchased on behalf of what event or what drive you were having or anything like that. So it's a little bit different, but in-kind does get treated separately on your tax returns. And so it's not anything less deduction, but you do want to keep those two separate. And so, but this month we're going to be talking about more things about recording contributions because and your contributions streamlined, easier, and you're not pulling your hair out at the end of the year. And everything matches. Churches get more resources and funds, and nonprofits do, and we can actually do God's work God's way. And the best thing about it is we can give you peace of mind. And so I want you to subscribe to our channel, Professional Support Staff on YouTube, or go to my website, www.prosupportstaff.com, and we are going to be here every Tuesday for Pro Talks, and we will be talking about recording other types of contributions next week. See you then.